buttress the case that they should be listed as a terrorist organization and address those concerns for our committee?
Okay.
So address the concerns that have been raised, and what's your perspective on those concerns?
The MAC was founded in 1965 by a group of students that did some study. And what they came up with was there should be equality between the leaders and those being led. Clerics should not have final say over the interpretation of the Quran. And clerics should not expect blind obediency from the congregation. Okay, that does sound like Marx and Lenin, but that also sounds like Jefferson and Madison in the writing of our own Declaration of Independence and our own Constitution. One of the comments made, especially at Camp Ashraf, well, they wear all the same clothing. But we are talking about the National Liberation Army. Of course, all armies wear the same clothing. Then comes the issue, well, they divorced and they live separately of each other. Considering what's going through with the MEK right now at Camp Ashraf, it's a good thing. And Masoud Rajavi saw the intensity of the problem and the fight ahead. And if he had a bunch of children to deal with all these pending attacks and things that were going on, it would make the problem even more complicated. And we're fortunate there are no children at Camp Ashraf. We're talking late teenagers, maybe. One of the young ladies killed, as shown in the video, was 20 years old. But that is pretty much the younger part of it. And Jesuit priests don't marry, but we don't call them a cult. So when we start peeling back the different accusations against them, they pretty much start falling apart. So when we start peeling them back, they fall apart. There's another rumor they're being held against their will. I would go through all the compounds and when I would visit with them, and sometimes those visits did not have much notice to the PMOI, and I'll explain one in a minute. And I would shake the hands of as many people as possible. And if they wanted to leave, they could hold the hand, and all we had to do was walk out. Also, we had two written agreements. The MAC, the MEK, did not want to keep people who wanted to leave. And the last rumor to address, and this was the one of the many I ended up debunking myself, I got a message from State Department. I had just returned from Germany, and the MEK had a training site on the compound, and it was at this exact location. And they were recruiting Iraqis at that time to be in it. I ordered my Marines to mount up, and we were ready to go straight to that compound. And one of the liaison officers said, "Colonel, you're welcome to go to any of our compounds anytime you want. You don't need to bring your Marines and force your way in." I said, "Okay, tell you what, I'm bringing one lieutenant with me, and we're going to that compound now. And if what State Department has told me is true, the rest of the Marines are coming." We went to the compound, and what we found, it was a site where workers were living, and they hired a lot of local labor. The local labor would come in on Monday and they'd work through the week. If they came and left every night and came back next morning, they had greater chances on one of the real terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, Badr, Mahdi Army, catching them and executing them. So for their own safety, they had a lodging arrangement set up. And I went through, and there weren't hundreds, there was somewhere between 50 and 80 at the most. I went through every building in that compound, except one, and now I'm walking out, and the liaison officer said, "Colonel, you haven't checked this building yet." I said, "I've seen enough. I know what is not going on here." He said, "Colonel, would you do me a favor and check the building?" So I went and checked the building, and sure enough, it was just where workers were being allowed to live safely so that they weren't putting themselves at greater risk. They weren't putting themselves at 5 times the risk. And if they had anything to hide, he wouldn't have said, Colonel, would you check the other building? I came back feeling totally stupid that the State Department report had got me into mounting up my Marines and ready to make a crash into a compound.